When you come into the live stream, by hitting that like button, the YouTube algorithm will grab the video, spread it around for more people to join in. And it will always make that comment section a lot more fun to be participating in if there's more people joining in on this live stream. So hit the like button when you come into the live stream. Today, we're going to be talking about how it is that inflation is caused by your luxurious life. This is really what causes inflation, is the increase in consumption due to the higher standard of living. Now, I am going to be reading from Cantillon's essay, not very much, just a little bit, because I think it's very telling of the situation that we are in. Again, that you can get this essay from the Amazon link that I leave down in the description. It is an Amazon link that does provide me with a little bit commission, but you do not have to buy this essay from the Amazon link. You can go and get the essay for free from the Mises Institute by Googling Cantillon Essay on Economic Theory. You can find that PDF file for free there at the Mises Institute. So, what is causing inflation is your luxurious life. That is ultimately what it is doing, right? Or what is causing the inflation. And the reason that is because of the added consumption that has taken place from the new money that you have received. And if Cantillon can describe it from hundreds of years ago, then we know that there's really no difference than to the economic forces that would be causing it today. So again, I'm going to be reading from chapter 6. This is in section 2 of the essay, chapter 6, the increase and decrease of quantity of money in the state. Now, again, I'm not going to read the entire thing. I'm just going to kind of read a section of it that is really telling of the situation that we are now in. And you can kind of recognize it here in the United States. Now, again, Cantillon was talking about the new money coming in from gold mines or silver mines. In our case, we would be seeing it from the issuance of credit. He does refer to, at some point, the issuance of credit being the way that new money comes into the system. But it doesn't matter what it is, how it is. It's the fact that the new money is showing up, right? And that's the point. All right. If the increase of hard money comes from the gold and silver mines within the state, the owners of these mines, the entrepreneurs, the smelters, refiners, and all the other workers will increase their expenses in proportion to their profits. Their households would consume more meat, wine, and beer than before. They will become accustomed to wearing better clothes and having finer linens and having more ornate houses and other desirable goods. So you think about that. When the new money comes in, what do they do with it? They take it, they buy more, they eat more food, drink more wine, drink more beer, they wear nicer clothes, and they live in better homes, right? And that's not much different from the way things are today. You know, drive nicer cars, right? Okay, consequently, they will give employment to several artisans who did not have much work before and who, for the same reasons, will increase their expenditures. So you think about it, all this new money is now coming in, it's going off to buy things that normally would not have been purchased, and especially when it comes to like artisans out there, people who are creating art that is not a necessity but an enjoyment, right? And so all of a sudden these people are now having access to this money. All this increased expenditures on meat, wine, wool, etc., necessarily reduces the share of the other inhabitants in the state who do not participate in the first wealth of the mines in question. So you think about it, all these people are going out there and they're with this new money and they're increasing their expenditures, right? They're buying more stuff. They're buying the nicer clothes. They're buying 2 ribeyes instead of 1. That increase in consumption is taking place. Right? Now, all right, and then the people obviously at the end of the line who have not participated in the new money coming in, they're just living with the old wages. They are the ones who are suffering at the end of it because they're not added with the new money to buy the extra ribeyes, right? All right. The bargaining process of the market will demand for meat, wine, wool, etc. be stronger than usual, will not fail to increase their prices. Right? So if people are buying 2 ribeyes instead of 1, there's not going to be enough ribeyes out there, and the people who are selling ribeyes are going to go like, man, there's a high demand for this because all these new people are buying ribeyes that didn't have the money before, but now they do, and there's not enough ribeyes around to go around, so up goes the price. These high prices will encourage farmers to employ more land to produce the following year, And these same farmers will profit from the increased prices and will increase their expenditures on their families like the others. So even more money starts to be spread around, right? Those who will suffer from these high prices, increased consumption, will be, first of all, the property owners. Now, that's something really interesting to think about, because most people look at like property owners are like the greedy bastards out there who are causing the issue, not suffering the consequences of it first. But really, you think about it, what was taking place before we experienced the all the inflation here in, in recent times, is that you heard a lot about how the landlords out there were not making enough money off of their rent, that the rents weren't high enough and that they weren't profitable from it. And a lot of people were like, hey, you're suffering the consequences of that, but that sucks for you. But nobody really took into consideration of what was actually happening there, is that they were actually experiencing inflation first. And this is something that Cantillon has talked about way back in the day, right? So let me read it again. Those who will suffer from the high prices and increased consumption will be, first of all, the property owners during their terms of leases, then their domestic servants and all the workmen and fixed wage earners who support their families on the salaries. So you think about it, those guys got hurt first, and that's why they started increasing their rents. And then from that point on, it started moving to everywhere else. Let me read it again. Those who will suffer from the higher prices and increased consumption will be, first of all, the property owners during their terms of leases, then the domestic servants and all the workmen or fixed wage earners who support their families on the salary. They all must diminish the expenditures in proportion to the new consumption, which will compel large number of them to emigrate and to seek living elsewhere. The property owners will dismiss many of them. You think about all the layoffs that take place, right? And the rest will demand wage increases in order to live as before, all the higher wages that people are demanding. In this manner, that a considerable increase in money from the mines increases consumption, and by diminishing the number of inhabitants, greater expenditures result by those who remain. Okay, and one more part here, and then I'll be done reading out of this. If money continues to be extracted from the mines, the abundance of money will increase all prices to such a point that not only the property owners raise their rents considerably when the leases expire and resume their old lifestyles, increasing their servants' wages proportionally, but the artisans and workmen will increase their prices of articles they produce so high that there will be considerable gains by buying them from foreigners who will make them much cheaper. That right there, take into consideration the things that were happening here in the United States when the manufacturing powerhouse started seeing all their manufacturers leaving to go to places where it was cheaper to manufacture. Right? This was due to the added increase of prices due to the added consumption. This will naturally encourage several people to import products at lower prices from foreign factories, and this will gradually ruin the artisans and manufacturers of the state, who will be unable to sustain themselves by working at such low rates because of the high cost of living. Right? See, this is important to understand, like what originally caused it. It was the increase in expenditures. It was that increased amount of all the increased expenditures on meat, wine, wool necessarily reduces the share for the other inhabitants. And then when you have the supply-demand imbalances, what begins to take place is the price increases. See, it's not just a matter of the money being printed and put into circulation, it's the matter of how that money is being used within the circulation, right? Is it being used to buy houses? Is it being used to buy cars? Is it being used to buy stocks and bonds? Or is it being used to buy toilet paper? See, if it's not being used to buy toilet paper, new money doesn't come in. You don't have an increase in demand for toilet paper because all of a sudden you had an increase in money supply. the demand for toilet paper stays fairly consistent whether you have an increase or decrease in money supply. The only thing that creates a demand for toilet paper is a shortage of it. And when you have a self-inflicted shortage, you can see the price of toilet paper really move, right? Because all of a sudden people don't have it, they're willing to pay any price for it. But just because you increase you hand everybody $200 in Astoria, you think they're going to run down and buy all the toilet paper? Or do you think they're even going to care about going down and buying toilet paper? They're going to go down and blow it down at the bar or the dispensary or something like that, you know? All right, how far are we into this? 10 minutes. Man, I could probably keep going on this, but let's see what you guys are talking about here, and I'll probably answer some more questions. All right, 179 people with 58 likes. Thank you very much for hitting that like button. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. Well, let's think about that. If there was too many dollars chasing too few goods, which I totally understand because that's essentially what ends up happening there, but is it necessarily the creation of the dollars that is doing it? Like quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflationary scenario the Federal Reserve was looking for. In fact, at the end of 2018, John Williams was saying that the problem that they were facing was an inflation that was persistently too low rather than too high. You can find that here at this document, Monetary Policy for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World. So we have to understand that the quantitative easing of 1, 2, 3, and 4, which quadrupled the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, it took it from $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion, failed to produce the inflationary scenario the Fed was looking for. However, a doubling of the supply chain did produce the inflationary scenario that the Fed was looking for. So a quadrupling couldn't, but a doubling does. And a severing of the supply chain didn't do it? I mean, I'm sure it did. Like, if it wasn't for the severing of the supply chain and an already disrupted supply chain within the lumber market, then we probably would never have seen lumber shoot up to $1,700 per thousand. Right now, it's at $500 per thousand. The very much the average price that we were experiencing just prior to the pandemic. There is absolutely no inflation within lumber. Why? And how is it that I was able to call that out when lumber was at its all-time high and everybody was pointing at lumber as the inflationary scenario commodity that everybody should look at? But yet, I called it out, and nobody wants to agree with the fact that it was a supply chain problem and not the money printer that was doing it. You know, I mean, I understand that you cannot have the inflation without the money printer, but you're not going to have inflation without the supply-demand imbalances. So what is inflation? All right? What is inflation? Inflation is the expansion of money and credit. What's the results of inflation? The symptoms of inflation, prices. How does that happen? Supply-demand imbalances. How does that happen? Increasing consumption or a supply chain breakdown or limitation of supply or an increase of supply. I guess it depends on which way you're going to look at it. These are the things that cause prices to move. And understanding it in that fashion is much easier than just saying money printer go burr, prices go up, because if that's the case, then you would have to be able to explain how quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 failed to produce the inflationary scenario, right? Which is difficult to do if you just have that one argument. All right, 216 people watching with 72 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. All right, we got Lumberjack Landlord up in the house. Your issue with YouTube, not UE, and not the people here to learn and ask questions. Wow, what's going on there? All right, let's back it up a little bit. Oh, okay. All-nighter. What, we got somebody in here? Too many small comments choke out all the other comments. Comments with others in mind, please. Wow. Yeah, well, all-nighter, you know what to do. All right, I'm happy for you to participate in the chat, and please don't spam. Wow. Okay, what's going on, guys? Let's see here. Inflation isn't an issue if it's created in the correct place that support the economy right now. We have to take risky loans to benefit from the economy. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with the idea that inflation isn't an issue if it's created in the correct areas. I don't think there is a way of control or creation or establishment of an economy that is going to be correct or good for everybody. Like, I believe that there is a control factor that can take place. I believe that there is many possibilities of operation, but ultimately I look at the economic forces that are underlying everything out there and see how the politics, how the people, and how the manufacturing and how the distribution of everything interacts with these economic forces that are at play. And understanding it from that fashion, it's kind of like going fishing, right? Have you ever seen anybody who's like gone fishing and they just like know where on the lake to go? Like, there's fish all over the place. Like, you can go anywhere, but they know exactly where on the lake to go, what lure to use, what bait, what, like, at what depths to fish, and they can just know. Like, they know what time of day, they know, or what time of day, if they're operating, how to fish. They can just like feel it. They just have this feeling for fishing and they're really good at it, and they just understand it. Well, they're not looking at it like you catch fish like this, right? What they are doing is they are knowing that fish operate like this, and this is how I need to operate in order to operate like the fish operate, right? That's it. Like, they're not putting out like some idea that it was just like this preconceived idea on what it is that you need to do in order to catch a fish, right? They go and look at the current environment and they say, this is what we need to do in order to fish, right? What's up, dude? Just came across one of your videos about monetary policy. Love your views and discussions. Educate the masses. Yeah, thank you very much. And I really do feel that my view that I have been putting out as far as the strategies coming from the Federal Reserve are very unique to this channel. Like, I don't know of a lot of people who are really discussing some of the things that I'm discussing, some of the points that I have been bringing up. You know, just recently, like, I was having a discussion and talking about another YouTuber out there who has like some really good views about things, but from what I understand, like, even the belief of like the Federal Reserve is lying, like, I don't believe that. I don't believe the Fed is lying. I think people's understanding of what it is that the Fed is trying to communicate is misunderstood. And then when they do see that it wasn't coming out the way that they had understood it, they look at it as a lie. Right? Like, if you came up and you had a conversation with somebody and then you walked away from that conversation believing one thing, believing something that came from that conversation, and then you come out months later and you're like, hey man, this is not the way you said it was going to be, and they were like, well, I didn't really actually say that, I just allowed you to believe it that way, or I didn't correct you when you believed it that way, right? It wasn't like I allowed it, it was just like you believed it a certain way and I didn't do anything about it. All right, knowing that, that's where the lie comes in, because most people feel deceived by that. All right, how many articles did you read out there? How many communications through the mainstream media that most people see where at the end of the year, the dot plot was guaranteeing like 7 interest rate cuts, right? Like, the Federal Reserve did not correct the communication of that. They did not come out and say, we didn't say that. Like, they kind of said it, but not really said it. They said like, oh, well, that's a bunch of the FOMCs, but not all of them. Well, that's the majority of the FOMC, the voting members, right? But it doesn't matter, right? Because the dot plot isn't a guarantee anyway. However, so many people had taken that to heart as written in stone, as if the Federal Reserve had communicated it out there, right? And this is like, this is something that I don't I don't know how many people are actually aware of the credible threat theory enough to then be able to recognize that that would be something that would happen, right? Like you would have to be aware that there is a credible threat theory that exists. Like you would have to understand like the idea of the gold machine, right? And if you're not aware of the gold machine, it was from a Ben Bernanke speech given back in early 2000 talking about how to prevent deflation from ever occurring in the United States once we hit the lower bound of zero. And he talked about using words, and he described it with the gold machine, as if a guy had hypothetically invented a gold machine that could produce as much gold at will with very little cost or energy. And the moment that this information gets out to the public, the price of gold on the market would plummet just because of the information alone. Like if they had scientifically credible, backed by incredibly scientifically backed that he could produce this gold, the moment that information got out there, the price of gold would plummet, even before he produced a single ounce of gold or even had the machine to do it. Just the announcement of it would be enough, right? And Ben Bernanke knew that this would be an effective tool for stimulating the economy, or at least dealing with the economy and using that as their monetary policy. Now you have to understand that, right? You have to understand that that's a possibility. Most people don't even know that's a possibility, and so therefore they cannot possibly take in a strategy that the things that are coming from the Federal Reserve, that forward guidance, that jawboning, that signaling, may also be a credible threat. Right? See, this is the way that we have to truly understand the Federal Reserve, because this is the way they said that they were going to do it. Right? And we've covered this in many, many videos, like even just recently with a, who was it, Jefferson Phillips speech, right? Where the communications that are coming from the Federal Reserve have been refined. Like they knew that way back in the day that if they were going to try and use this forward guidance signaling propagandized information, that they would have to have some sort of tools in order to communicate it out there to the public, because they never had it before. Prior to like the Greenspan days, they never said anything. Like they never communicated interest rate adjustments, and if they did, it was so confusing what it is that they were trying to communicate that nobody understood it anyway. You would just wake up one day and boom, interest rates were adjusted, and everybody would be like, whoa, what's going on? All right, $5. Let's go check that out. Super chat from Douglas. Thank you so much, Douglas. Does inflation approximate the rate of the move to luxuries? Well, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily like the inflation is the move to luxuries, something like that. Like you have to think, like, what is causing it's not the move into luxuries that is actually causing the inflation, right? It's the higher standard of living, right? So if a higher standard of living is the move into luxuries, like buying a nicer car, right? See, it was not, there's a moment there where you are a producer saver. Like if you graduate high school, you don't have anything, you didn't go to college, you're just out there working at McDonald's and you're busting your ass, and you get up to assistant manager, become a manager, and you're like, man, I don't like McDonald's, I want to manage a different type of store. And all of a sudden you find yourself managing some auto parts store or something of that nature because you were really big into mechanics or whatever. This is like you being a very industrious person, right? Even if you don't have any other skills other than sales and management, right? I mean, you just pick these things up from over time from working it. You are an industrious person. Now, with your industriousness that you have been a producer with your skills and a saver with your money. And you have grown yourself to a point in which that now you can get yourself something really nice, like a nice car. You've been working damn hard. You're in your early 20s, mid 20s, whatever. You've worked yourself up into this, like, better position as far as management goes. You're like killing it. You get a great income. You're thinking, man, I can drive a nice car. You move into a really nice car. Everybody's real impressed with it because you're driving this really nice car around, something that nobody really have expected, but you sacrificed a lot of time so you can put a good down payment on it. And then next thing you know, there's a recession turning in, right? And there's a downturn. So now all of a sudden you don't have the new money coming in, right? Your wages are getting cut back. And that expenses that you had, well, they're too much. And now you're suffering the consequences. Now, maybe because your hours got cut back, if you didn't have that new car, if you hadn't moved into luxuries, you would still have the down payment. You'd be able to carry along even though your wages got cut. Your lifestyle may not have even diminished. But maybe you didn't have the down payment. But just without the payment of the car, you might be able to drop your standard of living down some because of the payment that you were making towards the car. You wouldn't have to use towards your standard of living anymore. You can drop that. You see where I'm kind of getting at? If you look at things from your own personal point of view, you can take that into a business, into, the size of a country or anything else. But it's the idea that the industriousness of the people who were doing really good in the beginning, working and saving, that's the position in which it's about ready to flip. Because as soon as you work and save or produce and save, you're going to want to enjoy that. And the moment that you start to enjoy it, you start moving into a higher standard of living, you start moving into the luxuries, and everything is cool so long as you can maintain it. But most of the time, people move much farther into the luxuries than what they can handle. The farther you move into the luxuries, the issues start to rise where cheaper foreign production starts to find its way in to compete with the fact that the added consumption that was taking place from that new money and the higher standard of living that was taking place, because you're not eating one ribeye but two now. You see where I'm kind of getting at? And now this move is starting to bring in the foreign production and expelling, the domestic manufacturers. And there's really nothing, and this is the interesting thing about it, is that understanding it is that it's cyclical. Like, there's really nothing you can do. Right? I mean, you can tell the people, just be industrious, hardworking producers, savers. And that's it. Don't do anything else. Don't be buyers. Don't be luxuries. Don't move in a higher standard of living. Don't enjoy it. Right? But just be the producers and savers. Okay? And now, what kind of country does that sound like? Of just nothing but hardworking producer savers out there for the betterment of the country. Just saying. All right, 252 people watching with 94 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button, and thank you so much for being participant in the chat today. What are we at here? 27 minutes. Okay. Matt Bittner says, UE, how would you describe the people who live below their means and delay gratification when it comes to money? Well, I mean, most of the time, when you find people who are doing that, like, they don't have as much concern about, like, the economy like a lot of other people do out there. You will find that people who live below their means, now I'm not saying this because everybody is different, right? But generally, like, I've met some people who actually have a really decent income, and then I look at the way they live and they talk, oh man, things are so expensive and I can hardly make it, whatever. And I'm like, you make more money than a lot of people I know, and you have a house that's paid for, and you drive an old 1976 Chevy pickup, and your shoes have a hole in them. No, man, you're living way below your means, right? Way differently than anybody else. And because you can't save at the rate that you once did, you feel like things are really getting bad. And I mean, that's like, but literally that might be their mentality because that's the way they've been their whole life. Now, who knows what investments or whatever, they may not have invested anything in their entire life because they weren't really thinking about trying to get a return on their capital, but just literally saved it in the bank and realized, man, all this savings, all this hard work and everything I had done is being deteriorated, or my purchasing power is being deteriorated. Well, here's the problem with that, is that not understanding the money to begin with is the reason why that's deteriorating on you, because it's really not something that you should be saving in. Dollars are not is not something that should be saved, right? Gold is something that should be saved, right? Purchases of stocks to own a stock while the company is doing well is something that can be saved for a time, right? But dollars are not for anything other than a means of doing a transaction. It's literally the facilitator of trade. And that's it. Like, it's not to be a facilitator of savings. It's not to be a facilitator of all this other stuff. I understand other people want to give it that kind of definition, right? They want to give it that sort of purpose and idea, but that's not the way it is. That's not what it does, right? And even if there was people out there who tried to say that's what it does, it doesn't, right? I mean, maybe it does for you, but it doesn't for me, so I'm not going to consider that's what it does. But I do know that it does facilitate a trade. And I do know at times that trade can be either quite decent or it can be quite ugly, right? I mean, it's all depending on what it is that you're purchasing and who you're purchasing it from and the time that they are, trying to sell it to you. So just understanding it like that. But to, hold on to a $20 bill for 20 years and think, man, I'm going to use this for, a rainy day somewhere down the future, you're probably going to end up finding that your rainy day is going to be sticking around, considering that you won't have the purchasing power with your $20 bill any longer, right? So that's just it. You just have to understand that if you earn that money and you hold on to it, then you're taking a chance that you're going to lose it to a purchasing power. So you better have a strategy for it, which means that I need a place to go with this once the opportunity has presented itself in that timeline. Otherwise, I got to find it, right? I got to go into stocks. I got to go into bonds. I got to go into real estate. I got to go into silver and Bitcoin or whatever it is that you got for an idea. Maybe it's food and canning supplies and ammunition. It's all about what it is that you need in your life and what it is that you're looking for. I mean, there's people I know who do not look at anything else other than dumping all their money into real estate and flipping houses and stuff. Well, of course, this is a different time, but there was a time that's all they did. Like, they didn't think about like buying bonds. They didn't think about anything else except for flipping the next house and making the next, the next turn. And that's how they worked. That was their economy. And when things changed, their whole economy changed. And all of a sudden flipping houses didn't become something that was as easy as it once had been. Got to do what's best for you. All right, look at all these comments. This is amazing. Right on, guys. Thank you for being here. All right. I drove an old pickup 9 out of 10 times. Fools buy the new vehicle. I mean, I know that if I had a new vehicle right now, times it would yeah, YouTube is awesome. At times there's the YouTube revenue can be quite good. The AdSense revenue can be really good. Other times it's terrible, and when the algorithm isn't on your side and it's not doing well, I mean, what do you do, right? There's nothing you can do. You just got to keep going through it. Now, if I was to increase my expenditures and go out there and buy a new car with a higher payment, which I really want to do, and go and get that really badass Camaro that costs like $80,000, it would be a really expensive payment, right? Now, I could go buy a lesser vehicle, but then what's the point, right? I mean, you got to go and get the one that you really, 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 really want. Otherwise, I'll just really want this car because there's no payment to it. It has very low, issues. It has, low expense to me. I get to drive it as much as I want, and I don't have to really think about how much I'm spending on a vehicle. Right? So understanding, where it is that you are positioned in anything, can you take a hit to your income? If I lost all of YouTube, I could scratch by. I mean, it was like getting into the house was very difficult, right? I don't know if I could really do it today, even with the YouTube. I don't know if I could get into this house today, but if I lost that channel of revenue, then I mean, we could scratch by and try and make it, and it would be very tight and it'd be difficult, whatever, right? That's the position that most people do not look to be in. They don't look to be in a position in which that they can take a hit on their revenue, on their income. And that's why most people end up suffering in a belief, in an expectation on something outside of them, saying, hey, the government needs to step up and do something about this, because really now I'm in a position in which that I can no longer exist in the way that I had typically done. And unfortunately, things never stay the same. And so you're always going to have to shift with the ever constant changing tides and weather. And let's see here. What does Lumberjack says? Talking to all-nighter Hyde. Thank you, sir. Redis is just angry at his life results. Oh, you guys, is there a troll up in here just giving you guys a hard time? It seems like he's popping up a lot here in the comment. All right. Here we go, Matt. House flipping is more like a job and is vulnerable to soft economy. Owning rental property is way more recession resistant. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And see, that's the difference between being in, somebody says, are you into real estate? And you can be like, yeah, oh man, you must be doing terrible. Why? Well, because you were flipping houses? No, I have rental incomes. Oh, way different real estate than I was thinking. Okay, right? Depending on your economy, your individual, choices that you made. Uh, all right, the financial firefighter. The comment section is spicy today. Yeah, I'm not going to read some of those things. I'll let the moderators deal with it appropriately. All right, why pay the guy who picks you fruit miserable wages, yet you pay exuberant amount of money to non-essential jobs? Luxuries create a bit retardation in people. Well, okay, so is it really somebody out there like going, okay, well, let's see here, we need some oranges to pick, and so I know we're gonna pay that guy $5 an hour to pick these oranges. All right, go out there and find some people to pick oranges for $5 an hour. Is that the way it works? Or is there oranges that need to be picked and there's a bunch of guys going over there going, yo, I'll do it for $5 an hour? Right? Would you do it for more? Hell yeah. Will you do it for less? I'll do it for $5 an hour. Right? Because they'd probably do it for less. Low skill jobs are available to most, so we compete with almost everyone, and this keeps the wages low. That's right. Okay. The people who are going to win aren't showing off in this bad economy, lest they are the top 1%. So are you guys saying the ones who pick choose the wages? Are are you saying that they don't pick a job? Like I understand that there is not a lot of work out there, right? But you choose every step you make. And if you don't, then I'm okay. Well, that's your choice, right? I mean, it's your choice not to choose. It's your choice to say I'm a victim of my circumstances and there's nothing I can do except for pick the oranges. Right? And unfortunately, I have no choice in the matter of whether or not I actually get to work, and I have no choice in the matter of whether I actually pull the orange and put it in the bag and carry it along. I have no choice in it. You have choice in all that stuff, right? Now, it may not feel like a choice. It may not feel like you have opportunity. It may not feel like there's, other circumstances, but there always is, right? And because, it doesn't feel that they're there, doesn't mean that they're not there. And so, yeah, everybody exactly whatever it is that they are getting and earning and having in life is exactly what they deserve because that is exactly what they are thinking about and they are doing. They are not participating in any attempt to try and move on to anything else. Right? Even if it's difficult and you don't even know how to do it and you're trying, like that's the point. You're going to fail trying until you don't fail anymore, right? Even things that I want to do, trying to put the course and the book together and stuff like that, I'm failing all the time at it because I can't seem to get my mind together around it, making it right and doing wording it the way I want to word it and stuff. And so somebody else who's looking on the outside saying, dude, it's so easy, you could just do it like this, bang, right? Because they understand, they know it, like they got the practice for it, right? And that's the same for anything out there in the world. All right. Hey, Brody. Hey, Simon. Do you see us avoiding recession? If so, did the Fed succeed in their soft landing? How do you see things playing out over the next couple of years? Well, Brody, I mean, I brought this up before, and I think really this is the recessionless recession. I mean, if you were to ask somebody a couple of years ago, when the Federal Reserve goes to raise rates, what's going to happen? Everybody would have said the same thing. You're going to end up with a recession, right? You're going to have a housing market collapse. You're going to have, massive unemployment. You're going to have like all this stuff. You're going to have like all these crazy things taking place. And when I heard those things, I was thinking, okay, well, I have to take into consideration what is going on right now. right? Like right now, not what it is that people are saying is going to happen, but what's happening right now that would lead to that particular event, right? So right now, this is a couple of years ago, we have a huge worker shortage. Where the hell are all the workers? Where do they all go? How come there's a help wanted sign in every single business you could ever possibly have ever looked at, right? But yet there's going to be a massive rise of unemployment. And I'm thinking, okay, well, one thing has to happen first. You have to have all these help wanted signs disappear, right? Before you'll find a rise in unemployment. So just understanding that right there, like, if people are like, man, once they raise the rates, the unemployment's going to skyrocket. I'm like, well, once all the help wanted signs come down, you mean, right? Because right now there's a huge worker shortage taking place. All right. So that's going to be number one, right? Is that there's going to have to be this, you know, all these help wanted signs are going to have to get filled, or or all the jobs be filled over at the service industry, which means that there could be a lot of layoffs taking place. Right? So that's part of it right there. Recessionary pressures that come to the economy are done from unemployment rising. See, if you have unemployment rising, less people working, less people participating in the economy, less purchases being made, demand all of a sudden is starting to fall and supply starts to rise, you have businesses wondering what the hell's going on, where are all the consumers at, and they start to shut down, and then so goes on the problem, right? So unemployment rising is a problem for the Federal Reserve when it comes to the inflationary scenario that they are not getting because the unemployment is not rising, or they're not defeating, right? Because the unemployment isn't rising. And this is exactly in line with what it is that I believe that they wanted, because I don't think that they really want inflation to come down. And knowing ahead of time that the interest rates movements are not going to have the same impact to the economy that they once did. Like, they knew at one time in the past that if they adjusted interest rates, they could adjust employment, whether there would be an increase or decrease in employment. And if unemployment rises, then the consumption would begin to fall, and then the deflationary pressures would start to take place. Same thing on the opposite side. If they could stimulate the economy by the dropping of interest rates, get more businesses to invest within, get more companies to invest within business, expansion, hiring people, that hiring of people would then lead to more consumption. The consumption would then throw the supply-demand imbalances off, and you would start to see a rise in inflation. However, the adjustment of interest rates was no longer impacting the employment. We know this all the way back to the end of the Obama administration, all through the Trump administration. Historically low unemployment rates without hardly any difference. Even up to this day, we still have very low unemployment. And interest rates adjustments doesn't seem to mess with it like it once did, right? If they raised interest rates in the past, that would create a situation in which unemployment would begin to rise. We don't seem to have that situation as of yet. Give it time, it might occur. However, there was a time in the past it would have happened. Like, there would have been a guarantee. You would have guessed, you would have known that would have been taking place. So, did they avoid a recession? No, they bailed it out ahead of time. It was already pre-bailed out. Corporations were sitting on a ton of cash left over from the pandemic era, special purpose vehicle, corporate debt lending facility, propaganda, credible threat, and the unemployment's not rising because the people who get laid off from the corporations are going to work at the service industry. It's like, to me, that was something like, I don't know, I saw that a long time ago, and it's playing out now. I mean, if that continues to be the case, who knows? Like, give it enough time, and I would imagine that the unemployment will begin to rise, and rise significantly, which would then in turn theoretically start to put the downward pressure on inflation, which is ultimately what the Federal Reserve would be looking for if they were to do what everybody thinks that they're doing, which is to try and attempt to get down to a 2% target, which I don't believe any of that either, right? See, it's hard. Like, if you have to understand it the way that everybody else understands it, right? And then you have to be able to explain why it's not that way, and then have to go into the strategies of why it is the way that, this other form of thinking, because it's almost like speaking two different languages. I mean, most people don't even quite understand that. I mean, even people who know that there is a flexible average inflation targeting concept out there still don't know how to think or understand to look at the economy in a way that doesn't have that 2% target in mind. Like, even though they know that it's not a target, that there is no 2% target, that the Federal Reserve is not attempting to achieve a 2% target, but are going for an average inflation rate over time, even knowing that they are not, that the monetary policy is truly seeking an inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time, like knowing that, but yet still thinking, when are they going to cut rates? Man, it's like it's so hard, right? Because you have to disconnect from the original thought, and it's almost impossible, right? You have to reconnect to a whole new idea, completely different theory, right? Something that is like beyond anything that you had ever known or experienced coming from the Federal Reserve. Right? It's like, again, it's almost like speaking a completely different language. If you hear it and it sounds like something that's familiar, it's probably inaccurate, right? Okay. The Gore Fours. When there is already minimum wage laws set and put on government responsibility to negotiate minimum wage. Minimum wage is a bad idea. All right. They don't have any business cutting rates. I mean, even if they did cut rates, it wouldn't matter, right? I mean, we already know this from the low neutral interest rate. That the interest rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy is still incredibly close to zero, and that in order for the Federal Reserve to even be in a position in which that they can accommodate the economy, they would have to drop interest rates so low and so close to zero that no position that they can be in outside of zero would they be in a stimulative position. Even at zero, I don't think they would be that stimulating. Right? So there is an interest rate drop will not stimulate the economy. It could be making it less restrictive, but there is no stimulation coming from the interest rate drop, period. The longer time goes on, this is important to understand, the longer the time goes on, the longer or the higher the neutral interest rate will go if the inflation expectation will remain elevated. If the inflation expectation will remain elevated in time, is the critical factor to it, will carry the neutral interest rate higher. There could eventually come a time in which that the dropping of interest rates will stimulate the economy, but it's going to take time and pressure. And pressure meaning elevated inflation. And how long time takes, I don't know, because nobody can understand what the hell neutral interest rate is at a current moment, right? R star is their best guess. Tough stuff. You got to know all these things. You got to know all the stuff, right? But, I mean, no, you don't. I mean, I guess you could just say money printer go burr, prices go up, right? And just leave it at that. All right. Simon, what do you think about what's going on at Chrysler and the C-suit basically resigning because of the situation at the company? I don't know. I guess I really don't know any details about it. Man, I actually kind of like no minimum wage. Hate the government. I actually benefit from it, even if it's fair. Even if it isn't fair, yeah. You see, Ruro pays close to 70% in taxes and get paid almost nothing like in France. You must think that you do, but you probably don't. It really warps markets that trends to hurt everyone. Yui, thoughts on FedNow program? I think that was kind of a big deal. I did a video on it a long time ago, man, even long before anybody really even knew about like central bank digital currencies or anything. But as far as FedNow, I mean, I think that's kind of like an inevitable thing that is going to end up happening, like some sort of digital ledger transferring, digital currency of some sort, or at least the idea of being able to do transactions peer to peer, right? In a digital formation of it. And now, whether that's done through like a central bank digital currency that is like established, or whether it's done on something like a platform like Bitcoin or whatever XRP or something of that nature, I think everybody's going to be working on these things. And is it another step towards the cashless society? I think it is, right? I think this is one of those, one of those things that are inevitable. And I don't I don't know if there's like an actual way of moving towards a position in which that you can prevent a cashless society, because ultimately I think the cashless society is the way that they're going to attempt to keep the system going and to prevent it from absolute collapse. So if you're trying to prevent a cashless society, that will actually bring on the inevitable collapse, which is fine. We can start something new. I'm cool with that. Um, but I don't think most people are really prepared to deal with something of that nature, and especially when it comes to like those who are getting close to the retirement age or who are already in retirement age. They certainly don't want to deal with that kind of issue. They just want it to carry along long enough for them to be done with it, and then whatever happens happens. But for the rest of us, we have to kind of be concerned about what the inevitable will be. And when it comes to the establishment of digital processes, things like the FedNow, I think it's all a matter of time. Right? It's just another step in that direction, because they got to go cashless in order to take interest rates negative. That's ultimately it. That's the whole point of the whole digital thing, by the way. Yeah. And yes, the tracking, tracing, all that other stuff that comes with it, all the scary things, yeah, that's part of it too. But it's really about carrying the system on. And the only way to really carry the system on is to be able to go into negative rates, right? Now, the consequence of what it is that they are going to do in order to go into negative rates is the tracking, tracing, and all the other stuff that people are scared of. But that's the second thing, right? The first thing is the negative interest rates and the monetary policy that is leading us to that situation in which that the creation of a negative interest rate environment can happen. Then the symptoms from that, which is all the other crap that everybody is scared of, that's what's going to come from that. All right, an hour into this thing. Okay, living in progressive Portland, Oregon. It's dog crap, but my home is heaven. Yeah. All right. From what I hear, San Diego has no cheap areas anymore, but yes, Compton is not the 90s anymore. Hey, let's do everything except pay workers in a living wage. Well, I mean, how is it that you force people to do a minimum wage without having government control come in and do that, right? So if you want to live in a socialistic environment, then yeah, you could probably have a situation in which that you would get paid a living wage, right? Like, I mean, to be honest, like I'm not real fan of any type of government that exists out there at all. Like I cannot tell you the wonderfulness or the horribleness of any single type of government out there, because I think they're all bullshit. Every single one of them. There is no power out there that should have any kind of governance over my life except for me and what it is that I have a belief in. That's it. After that, any kind of governance is an intrusive thing that I don't want in my life. I don't want somebody to come in and say, hey, you have to pay this person a living wage. I don't want that. Right? Now, somebody else might want that. I don't. And I understand why somebody else would want that. And I understand that if they're going to try and create an environment that does that. And I understand that I have to be in a position that has to now deal with the fact that there's people out there who want other people to come in, take control of somebody else's efforts and say, this is what you have to do with it. And I understand that now my view of that is going to be in an obscure view to everybody else's view, who now wants to vote for the right appropriate person to take control of everybody else's lives to make sure that these people are dealt with properly. I mean, it's just like the whole thing to me is just like, okay, I'm backing up. Like, I don't want any of this. Yeah. I don't need them. What I, the only thing I really want is opportunity. Right? And there's opportunity all over the place. Not always is it easy to see, but it is everywhere all the time. And that's the difference, right? Nowhere, never is there going to be a time in history that they are going to present us with an ability to say, hey, man, you are going to live a luxurious life, and all the people around you are going to experience the exact same thing, right? There is no time in history. There is nothing that can be set up. There's nothing like that that's out there, right? Think about the opportunities that you have right now that did not exist 20, 30 years ago, and be thankful for that and go for it. Here's what's funny about it. It was just like, I even think about the ability to even buy into the stock market, which I know a lot of people might like disagree with. But, there was a time when I wanted to get into the stock market, and it was like E-Trade accounts, right? Where it was $10 a trade. So it was $10 to buy in, $10 to get out. And if you were only wanting to invest $100 at a time, that was 10% commissions right off the bat. There was no way that it was a horrible idea, right? There was nothing you could do to really like participate in that game at such a small number. I mean, if you had $10,000, that would be different. Now, Cash App, bam, boom, no problem. $10 worth of stock, bop, just like that. Load it up. $50 of Bitcoin once a week. Boom, 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 no problem. Right? Think about that opportunity. That wasn't available to people, 20 years ago. Just that simple being able to participate within the stock market. Again, like some people might look at that as a bad thing, but to me, that's a good thing. And it's just like another one of those opportunities that most people don't even realize they have. We always have to adapt to whatever is going on. Better to focus on what we can do rather than blame all the unfair things going on. Well, for sure, because what you're going to end up doing is you have an expectation out there, and you're expecting other people to meet your expectations. All right? Why don't you meet their expectations? Maybe they have higher expectations of you. Maybe the whole universe has a higher expectation of you. Maybe if you recognize that and had higher expectations of yourself, you would realize that other people would recognize the higher expectations and then give you opportunity. Speaking at Rebel Capitalist in a few days. Holy crap. How the hell did that happen? I don't even know what I'm going to say. You know that, guys? Like the first time I went to go speak there, I was so scared. I repeated the exact same thing that I was going to say over and over again for 30 days straight. Right? This time I have no idea what I'm going to go up there and talk about. I'm going to kind of do the same thing I did over at Zuber's place, over for Zuber's convention. All right. Meet Kevin likes to drive drunk. Oh, well, that's a terrible thing to say. Come on, man. All right. I'm totally for capitalism as a tool for democratic governance is absolutely necessary. I mean, okay. All right, stay curious. We would be able, or this is coming from the Gore Force, says, stay curious. We would be able to implement amazing changes nonviolently. Stalin's ideology lives on. Can you live stream the Rebel Capitalist event? I don't know if George is going to want me to live stream the actual Rebel Capitalist live event. One of the things that I had done is we had done a recording from the audience, and if you don't have if you're not tapped into the sound system, you're taking like audio of a big room, and not always does it come out very good. I might do some live streaming while I'm at the Rebel Capitalist, but I don't know if I'm going to necessarily be live streaming the Rebel Capitalist event or my speak or whatever. Okay, the government helped create the internet and the expansion of connectivity. So to say you are against government, you are against YouTube channel, Got to be fair in your assessments. Okay, well, STR 3888. Thank you very much for the comment, and I do somewhat agree with the idea that there is initiations that can come from the government that could spark things that are good for the people, but I do believe also that those things could have come into existence all on their own. However, the jump starting of the technology coming from the government to force it into existence is a good thing at times. I do believe that. Space is one of them, right? The internet, great. Maybe the communications and the laying out a grid work to make the communications happen, telephones, power cable lines, stuff like that. Getting grants and subsidies to make these things happen so the communication can happen faster and create good things for the people. I do agree with a lot of that stuff. However, with that being said, why is it that space travel is now going into the private sector? Why? Because it's always going to be cheaper, more efficient, and better service. Everything about it is going to be better from a private capitalistic point of view, as opposed to government, which is going to be wasteful, overspent, inefficient, right? It's not, doesn't mean it's not good. I mean, it's not like a good thing, right? And it can create those, expedite those scenarios. But it doesn't mean that they're like, if they were so good at everything, they'd be making cell phones, right? But they don't make cell phones, right? Private sector makes cell phones. And although cell phones are kind of expensive, the original cell phones that came out, considering even back in the day how much they cost, even the like not adjusted for inflation, they were hell of expensive back in the day considering what they pay for a price now. And the ones you have now are more powerful than the space traveling equipment that went into space back then. All right? So what you have now is a device that is far, far, far more technologically advanced and superior to what it once was, and it wasn't the government that did that, it was private sector that did that. That's why, again, that's why the private sector is going to take over space travel. So no, I can say that. I can say it. Private sector would have done a much better job of laying out communications for everybody, because if you had competition to get communications to the people so that they would pay, the most efficient people who could lay out communications would be laying them out to get the money, right? Having competition is good for the price. It's the best for the price. In fact, there's no other way to get the price. If there was one person who was doing it like the government, then there is no price establishment. Price discovery is what I should say. My solution is, if Americans turned off the TV and internet for a year and started caring for their own, this would take a different direction, but that's just a dream. Yeah, it kind of is, and I do believe that we do need a better connection with each other, that the devices that we use are not a substitute for meaningful connections, but that's what people end up doing, is they use that for their meaningful connections. If we had that closer bond with the people around us, we would be much more understanding of their situations and therefore be making decisions that would be much more communal, right? But instead, we don't have that, right? It is going down to survival of the fittest. There is no idea of, hey, we can do this together, right? There is the wish for it, but there's no real realm of possibilities for it. And the main reason is that we are not the producer-saver nation. If we were a producer-saver nation, we could totally do that together, right? But we're not in there now. We're at that moment where we have a higher standard of living and we go into luxuries, which means that we're now in competition for the cheapest luxuries. And that's, there's no changing that. It's not going to change. Like, I would love for it to. I mean, I want to create a theory that says, hey, man, this is what it would take in order to fix it. And it's very wholesome and encouraging, and it's awesome for everybody. And we all going to want to do it once we learn the process of it. But once everybody learns that they're going to be suffering in misery and poverty for generations, dealing with extra hard work for an extended period of time to pay back debt that we didn't take on, and do that for a long, long time, and then create a situation in which that we can be producers and savers again, like, that doesn't it's not going to happen. You know, like I say this in every video now, and it's just like I come to the realization. I hope other people do as well. All right. Let's see here. How much the property price will increase if the dollar loses reserve currency status? Well, that's okay. Shafi, if I say the name right. I mean, I think you're taking on a hypothetical question to something that is a hypothetical circumstance to begin with, because there's no hypothetical currency that can even compete to what the dollar is doing. So to say what's going to happen if the dollar loses its world reserve currency, first of all, we have to think, why would the dollar even lose its world reserve currency? Like, that would be the better question to ask, because then you don't even have to take on a strategy of, or maybe you do. But I can't come up with a reason or an idea or a circumstance in which that the dollar would lose its world reserve currency status. And because I can't find that, I don't need to think about anything else after that, because there is no strategy that I need to take on. The strategy I need to take on is, how does the dollar lose its world reserve currency status? Once I figure that out, then I can take on the consequences from it. But I can't find it. So I don't take that on. I take on, what is it going to be like if the dollar continues to operate as the world reserve currency, because that's the situation I see taking place, not the failure. Like, if there was a failure, that means it's a complete and utter collapse of the dollar. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't, any consequence to the dollar is now just obsolete, because it doesn't even matter anymore. Like, what happens to your house payment, what happens to all this other stuff, you're probably not going to end, if you have a house payment, you're not going to end up with enough dollars to pay it back, so you're going to lose it. And you're going to lose it to somebody else who's going to bid whatever dollars that they have available to bid on it, right? Because the collapse of the dollar means that the dollar is going to strengthen, right? And even losing its world reserve currency status means that it's going to strengthen. And that's hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, but you also have to understand that the dollar is not necessarily being used as the world reserve currency. It's contracts that are due in dollars that is being used as the world reserve currency. You see, it's still dollar-based. It's still the dollar. Everything is due in dollars at the end of the day, but it's not necessarily a dollar that's facilitating the trade. It could be a U.S. Treasury that's facilitating the trade. It could be some other foreign sovereign issuer of debt that's done it in U.S. dollars that's using it as a facilitator of the trade. And when the dollar ceases to be the world reserve currency, all those debts come due in dollars. And if they're hard to get, then guess what? Those nations are going to start going bankrupt because of the strengthening dollar. All because they want to get out of it. Transactions begin to diminish because there's no money to do transactions with, because nobody's writing contracts in dollars. See, this is I see it. I can see it happening. Like, I could see as if it was taking place. I don't see it taking place, but I see what it would look like if it did. And I don't see it happening. Like, I don't see it. Like, I mean, if I did, I'd be saying it. Like, I'd be like, man, these are the things that you'd have to be concerned about. But once you kind of take on the considerations, like, what was that dollar funding stresses in China? Very telling of, like, how much dollar denominated debt exists outside of the United States. And it's like, it's very telling for the demand for the dollar. All right. My dollar loses value by buying gas. I thought it makes scarcity of gas. It will raise value. Well, it doesn't make scarcity of gas, because gas is in production, right? Every day there's gas being made. How much are you consuming comparatively to everybody else would then start to create the situation in which the gas prices start to go up, right? So if you and everybody else is buying gas at the same time, well, guess what? That's a demand for it. But if nobody's buying gas, gas prices start to fall. I mean, it's just all there is to it, supply and demand. All right, today is Decoration Day, not Memorial Day. The definition was changed. Words matter. Human-run systems will always be inefficient, but that does not negate the necessities of them. No, I mean, I understand in the idea of having some governance, right? We can't have people acting a fool and creating, a bad society for other people because of their foolishness, right? I understand that we have to have some sort of idea of authority to guide us into our behaviors of like acceptance by other people, right? I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but it's like literally like control of the masses. I get that, right? I mean, we all want to have a peaceful place to be and, operate, and we want to have a certain set of conditions that we can all have some expectations from. Like, I totally get that part of it. However, at what point does it limit? Right? I mean, there is no limit to power, right? You give a little bit, it's going to need more. And once you give a little bit more, it's going to need even more. And so there is no like limit to power on like, okay, we can always govern it to this point, but then they can't take any more. That's not possible. If you're not paying attention, then you don't know, you don't see it, it's gone. And that's the unfortunate thing. Like, people say we need some government. Well, yeah, we need some serious oversight to government. Not government. And government's obvious, right? We do need some government. We need serious oversight to government is what the statement should be. Okay, Comrade Simon. Whatever. All right, I suspect that we build up more NA manufacturing, and this will stimulate short-term growth. All right. Imagine if all roads were toll roads. Elementary schools is only for people who can afford it, and individuals have to pay the police and fire protection. Okay, the big cat. I get it. And this is probably where, like, I think a lot of times we end up offering up what it is that we should be doing for the conveniences of somebody else. Right? Now, I'm not going to try and say that toll roads would be the way to go. And I'm not trying to say that taxing people and the gases that they are doing is the way to make the roads happen. Right? The roads take place the way they do because that's the way that is, right? If there was a more efficient way of going about it, then it would happen that way. Right? Now, there are places where there's toll bridges and toll roads and highways and stuff like that that do exist. So in those places, it happens. All right. So now, when we think about what it is, hold on. So when we think about what it is that we are doing with our money when it comes to the services that we use, you have to know that there are some things that are just more efficient to have the government do it, and then there's other things that the private industry is going to do far more efficiently than the government will ever have a possibility of doing. Now, here's what's funny about public schools, right, is that not terribly familiar with what it is that goes on at all public schools out there. I really only have the experience of the public schools that I went to and the ones that my kids go to. Something that I found very interesting about these is that I don't see where the education process is the benefit to the child. I see where the education process is to the benefit of creating somebody who will then exist within society without question. Like the creation of an American person, right? That doesn't question, doesn't fight back, just goes along with the whole thing, right? There's no questioning to authority. They're just here, right? There's not a higher education brought to them to say, hey, we can, give you the best chance in the world to become engineers and scientists and all that other stuff. Like that's not done there. It's done here. Here's how you cope with society, right? Here's how you function. Here's how you get a job. Here's how you pay your taxes. Go off into the world. So here you have this system set up that says, hey, there's some people who just never get a chance, right? So you have to give them this opportunity. And that very opportunity actually conditions them to never be able to succeed properly. Like it literally forces them or magnetizes them to the lower level. And that's what I see happening within it. So if it's a good thing, maybe, because, you learn to read and write and do math. But then again, on the flip side of that, had you learned the reading, writing, and math only, but then learned everything else about the world from a real life situation as opposed to being conditioned to operate, right, we would have a much different society. So the public education system is very much indoctrination. And I see it now, especially coming from the economic point of view, where people are like, man, you should be educating other people in this so that they understand it. Yeah, it's because there's no way in the world that this system would operate if they were to educate people the way that I understand it, because that would not be an indoctrination to operate within the system. Like literally the guidance into from the public school system into society is the reason why the system is able to operate. It is because it confuses the hell out of the people so that they don't understand how it works. That's the point. That's all right. I'm gonna call it quits, guys. How long are we? An hour and 15 minutes into this. All right. Private, yeah, let's see here. An hour 15, we'll call it quits. We got 259 people, 172 likes, $5 in super chats. I'm teaching my nephew carpentry. He will thrive. I just look at rich and peaceful countries, and all of them have a robust government sector. I hear what libertarians say about government, and I think Guatemala, Haiti, and Somalia. All right, well, let's think about that for just a second here, to Big Cat. So, the rich and peaceful countries. What rich and peaceful countries are there? I mean, those two combinations, rich and peaceful. Like, I don't know those countries. I mean, I know of ones that tried to claim that we're doing this in the name of peace and goodness, right? That's a good one. I like that, right? But I guess that would be a matter of opinion, right? Switzerland. All right. Break's done. Thanks, Simon. See you guys on the next one. Right on, Crypto Beauty. Norway, Europe has some rich and peaceful countries. Okay. So these rich and peaceful countries, right? Now, I have to think about how in these nations, no, I'm not trying to say that it's a good or bad thing, but now I do have to say that when I operate, the less that has intrusiveness into my life, the better I feel about that, right? No, but it doesn't matter what it is. Like, if I can have less intrusiveness, and a lot of these nations, and I'm not, whatever one you want, has a lot of taxes that you have to pay. But on the flip side of that, you got a lot of services. You see, so people are saying, hey, I have all this medical insurance, or I have like this retirement, or I have like, these maternity leaves, or I have all these things, right, that are really awesome. But now you're reliant, right, on this awesomeness to create this world of expectations that you have of it. But now you're under that rule, right? See, there was a time when it says, hey, man, I don't want anything that you have, because I'm a freedom-loving American who can provide for myself everything that I need, okay? And now when government says, well, if you don't listen, or if you don't follow, or if we don't tax, or if we don't, you're going to lose this thing. And it'd be like, lose what thing? I don't have anything coming from you. Remember, I don't have anything from you. So that's the difference inside of it. Like, most people don't realize how much they are giving up when they get what they think is so much value, right? Having the health insurance, having the retirement, having all that other stuff, that's security. Do you realize the warnings that the United States forefathers were giving about that security? Anybody who gives up security for freedom, or gives up their freedom for security, deserves neither and loses both? Do you, like, this is like those things that people talk about as being like awesome parts of their economy that contribute to the betterment of their society, I look at as a fearful thing towards freedom. Most people don't see it that way. They look at it as like, no, it gives me more freedom, more relaxed. I'm feeling better about I don't have this anxiousness about worrying about my health or anything else going on. But they don't realize what they have done is they have given up their freedom for that security. And at any given time, although it's not right now and you may not see it, it could go away. That's it. If you never wanted it, never asked for it in the first place, then you have total freedom away from it all. I mean, is that really peaceful to me? No, it's not. I don't find that to be peaceful to have such kind of power over my life. The less I would have over it, the more peaceful they would have over it, the more peaceful I would feel. Right? And that's, I think, the difference in perception, right? Just the way that people look at things and perceive it, the meaning that they give it. Like, I don't have any problem with people wanting to have health insurance in their life. Like, I don't have any problem with people wanting that for other people in their life, right? The problem that I have with it is forcing it to happen. That's the problem that I have. Exactly right, Yui. Thanks. I mean, it's not the view for everybody. Like, I get it, but a libertarian mindset to me is the most freedom-loving mindset that you could possibly have. And anytime you're ever giving up your freedom, you're asking for security from somebody. Don't ask for the security. Secure it yourself. Your expectations should be only on you, not on anybody else out there. Jeff, I gotta go, guys. What time is it? 2:05? Okay. Jeff, mercantilism with Marxism is what today is most industrialized nations. Right? When cops don't carry any insurance for murdering tax slaves and pass the cost of their crimes back to the tax slave. Can we truly be free in the system? No. Alrighty, Brody. Have a great day. Thank you, Simon. He says, yeah, thank you, guys. This was a lot of fun hanging out, talking about the inflation. I like reading from Cantillon's essay because when you can recognize some of those things from hundreds of years ago, and you can recognize some of the forces that are taking place today, then you know that you don't have to blame it on politics or greed or environment or anything else that's going on out there, but you can just understand that it's the flow of money and the way that it's happening that is creating the situation that we're in. And, you know, what do? You make the best decisions for yourself. Nobody knows what it is that you need in your life but you. You are the only one who knows what goals and ambitions and expectations you have. You're 18 years old trying to figure out what to do for the rest of your life, or 80 years old trying to figure out how to hold on to what little you have for the rest of your life. It's not the same choices, right? And it's not the same decisions you're going to make, but we're all looking at the same thing to try and figure out what it is that we need to do. So, again, thank you very much for joining in on today's live stream. There's links down in the description. I think I left some links down in there. I hope I did anyway. And I hope to see you guys at the Rebel Capitalist. If you're going to Florida this week, I will be there on Friday through Sunday evening, and then back to work I go. All right. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.